fugitive who's being hunted all over the universe.
Who could that be?
Could do a lot worse than throwing in his lot with the crew of Backus 3.
The Backus 3 was the primary starship seen in Sandy Frank's epic picture, Star Force. Sure, the film itself wasn't really a film at all, but rather a poorly edited, poorly dubbed compilation of episodes of a Japanese Star Wars ripoff. But hey, the ship itself is still awesome, and really stands apart from others. First, it has a magic booze bottle that is always filled and ready for the ship's fearless leader, Captain Joe. In addition, the ship has some of the most advanced electronics seen in any universe. We have the temperature meter, which is far more sensitive and accurate than any standard temperature meter. Also, it has a gauge that has yet to be seen on any other ship, the sunny side and other side gauge. Really, I don't know how all the Enterprises have lasted as long as they have without these very important gauges. And finally, the ship itself is vastly more powerful than even the Enterprise E, as can be seen here.
It kind of looks like Captain Joe's in the bucket, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, he's had a few.
It's the opening of Mannix.
Sorry.
Dun-dun.
You know your ship is bad when you attack things by crashing into them.
No. There is no escape. The gateway is open, and you are all coming with me.
The Event Horizon was the primary villain of the film of the same name. The film itself was cheesy, yet rather imaginative. Essentially, the ship was the villain, as I said. What basically happened was this. Humanity created an FTL ship. They tested it, and instead of winding up at another planet, it went to hell, whereupon a demon possessed the ship. Now, some have often wondered whether this was a prequel of sorts to the Warhammer 40k universe, since in that series, to travel faster than light, one literally had to go to a dimension that could be described as hell, or as they call it, the warp. Now, in order to protect oneself from hell while going through it, one had to have special shields to survive, which the Event Horizon did not. All told, it was a rather memorable ship in a fairly wacky movie. This ship is ass. Literally. It is the Alliance spaceship Vpal Blade, seen in the outlandish, yet realistically styled novel series called The Looking Glass Wars. Essentially, the ship was a refit Ohio-class nuclear submarine. The engine that powered it and allowed it to go faster than light was a small book-sized warp drive that was found on another planet. Confused? Well, good. You see, in the first book, called Into the Looking Glass, humanity accidentally created portals called Higgs bosons that allowed for travel between worlds, and after that, typical SF stuff ensued. Eventually, due to contact with other races, they were able to build the ship. In the two books that featured it, at the end of both of them, the ship was a little more than scrap. Basically, they had to fight vastly more powerful aliens, and they still won, but the ship got really beat up. In fact, by the end of the second book, the ship was beat up so bad they just went ahead and rebuilt an entirely new one. Now, the book series itself is most notable for the fact that the power of rock was actually used to destroy an alien dreadnought. Most space navies do not believe that the one-man fighter is any kind of a threat. Well, as they proved in Star Wars Episode 4, most modern space navies are proven wrong. The 2D shoot-'em-up genre features some of the most powerful one-man fighters ever created. These ships face down hundreds of thousands of enemy fighters and capital ships. Indeed, many of these super fighters have won entire wars single-handedly. Now, which fighter could be considered the greatest of them all? Well, that is always, of course, open to interpretation. In my humble opinion, I say that the ship from Pulstar is the first among equals. This ship was piloted by a woman that is pretty badass. You can blow up her ship, but that doesn't stop her. Oh no. All that does is make her fall asleep. In Pulstar, you have to face an entire screen full of enemies. You basically have no chance in this game unless you are a 2D gaming god. In Pulstar, you learn what it means to be one fighter against a space navy. Thus making Pulstar the first among equals, but still one among many.
Establishing all navigation data.
Output of all engines is stable. We can launch.
Okay, so where are we headed, old man?
Hey, found 7. The water planet.
All right, let's go!
The Outlaw Star is one of those ships that just goes a step beyond. Essentially, it is like the Millennium Falcon, but it doesn't stop there. The ship navigates through FTL not with a computer or an AI, but rather, it has a naked hot chick android do it. Oh, and it gets better. To activate the ship, all one has to do is put the key in the ignition. Just remember to always put more than $5 in the tank. Now, for weapons, the Outlaw Star has standard missiles and machine guns, but in addition it has large grappler arms for the captain that wants a fistfight in space. Still, the Outlaw Star was notable for the fact that it did ferry people to meet a being that closely resembled God.
As of this moment, we are at war.
As the primary ship of one of the greatest SF shows of all time, the Galactica, or Big G as it is affectionately known, does not disappoint. With its impressive profile and logical purpose, it truly becomes one of the greatest starfighter carriers of all time. Now one must realize that in most space shows, space combat is somewhat similar to old pirate broadsides. Essentially, the ships are locked down on a 2D plane and they just hurl futuristic cannonballs at one another. But here, the Galactica actually makes sense. You see, in a modern navy, large-scale battleships are completely obsolete. In fact, not a single nation on Earth actually uses a battleship anymore, as they have been completely and utterly supplanted by aircraft carriers. So therefore, it would make far more sense that in a future where there is a space navy, that they would continue using that doctrine, thus ensuring the Big G's place at number 8. The Daedalus class battlecruiser is one of the most powerful ships on this list, as it is actually powered by Asgardian technology. It is also one of the fastest starships as well, as it is able to travel to other galaxies. Now remember, it would have taken Voyager some 70-odd years to crawl across the Delta Quadrant. The class's namesake was involved in a large number of pivotal space battles that decided the fate of humanity, and it was never found wanting. The Satellite of Love. While the ship did not actually engage in combat or explore strange new worlds, it did at least serve as the setting for one of the greatest TV shows of all time. Mystery Science Theater 3000 brought us countless hours of humor. Here are 2 examples of just why this ship gets so high on the list.
This is the song written for the train chase. This is the chase, Rocky and Ken. He tried to kill me with a forklift. Olay!
Space Chief failed miserably and tried to cover up his shame.
The USS Sulaco was of the rather difficult to pronounce Conestoga class. The ship was featured prominently in Aliens, and really did not do much at all. However, the thought process behind the ship is what really makes this vessel so notable. Unlike other ships, this one is fully automated, meaning that it does not really need a human crew. The combat intelligence is actually smart enough to ensure that the craft functions adequately, and, in the event of crew death, could even fight a space battle. That's something else that makes this ship rather notable. Space battles in the Aliens universe are actually a bit more realistic as well. It is described in the Aliens Colonial Marines Technical Manual that space battles resemble assassinations rather than epic combat, which makes sense, really. If you are fighting for your life, you really don't care if it looks good or not. Yes, Sir Isaac Newton really is the toughest SOB in the galaxy. The SR-1 Normandy is really one of the greats due to the fact that for all intents and purposes, it is your ship. You are now in the center seat. The ship itself just looks great, and it really feels like a military starship. And really, who can forget that galaxy map? When you open that thing, you really get sucked into the moment. But wait, what about the Normandy 2? Should I not give that a mention as well? Well, seeing as how this is my list, I have decided to give 4th place to both Normandys. Because the Normandy 1 was great. You really got to feel like Captain Picard. In the second, you were Captain Picard, but with far more hair. Everything about the Normandy 2 just felt larger than life. From the warp core to your bloody cabin. And that's really where BioWare went the extra mile. Look at this. You've got a starship rack, just like Picard. And you even have the Normandy 1 model right there. And finally, you also get an aquarium. Definitely, Picard with hair. Now I really need to try to find a way to get some tea Earl Grey hot. The one problem with the second Normandy, and the reason why I'm including both, is the fact that you no longer have access to that awesome vehicle. In Mass Effect 1, you got to drive around and explore strange new worlds. But in the second, you just got a shuttle, and I'm not even going to bother showing it, because I'm pretty sure you can figure out what shuttles landing on planets look like. Really, with that, you got to explore about 6 inches of a strange new world. But no matter which one you like, it got most of us sci-fi nuts that much closer to the center seat.
What a piece of junk!
Has there ever been a more iconic line? The Millennium Falcon is probably the second most well-known starship in history. Captained by the great Han Solo, the Falcon has flown further, fought harder, and survived far more punishment than just about every ship on this list. This ship really represented a break from the norm in 1977, as it was a used ship, piloted by a scruffy captain, which was a far cry from the pristine, gleaming, fresh from the dockyard ship, commanded by a person that was second only to Jesus. Essentially, this was a ship that was just piloted by a regular guy. Not some grand official captain, but just a regular person that rose to become something more. In a way, the Falcon is a reflection of its captain. When it rolled off the production line, it was just yet another YT-1300 stock freighter. But, as time went on, it became something far more.
I've already got a female to worry about. Her name's the Enterprise.
As long as it has an Enterprise in the fleet, Starfleet will never lose. The very first starship to bear the name all but built the Federation with its poorly written adventures. The second solidified it and became the most recognized ship of all time in 2 universes. Later, the ship would get a new lease on life with a refit and would save the Federation several more times. But, as with all things, even the greatness of the Enterprise had to end. But with its death came a new ship, the Enterprise A, and it would go on to end the aggression between the Klingons and the Federation, and in so doing ensure that history remembers it for all time. Well, moving on from the non-adventures of the B, the C proved to play a pivotal role in ensuring that the Federation remained at peace with the Klingons. The D, being tenacious or otherwise, is probably the second most famous. Like its 23rd century counterpart, the D ensured that the Federation would continue to live long and prosper. Unfortunately, just like its 23rd century counterpart, it too met its untimely end. But from its ashes rose the Enterprise E, and like with the A before it, went on to save the Alpha Quadrant many, many more times. In the end, all things are possible for the ship named Enterprise. Of all the ships listed, this was your ship. Really? In KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2, one really felt like this was one's personal starship. In Mass Effect 1 and 2, the Normandy felt like it was Shepard's ship. Shepard had his command due to his past and all of his various past accomplishments. With the Ebon Hawk, on the other hand, you made its history. You commanded its crew because of the deeds that you did. The ship itself, of course, was inspired by the great Millennium Falcon, and shares many of its design cues. My only problem is the fact that it is orange. Now, in all reality, in 2003, this was one of the very first times that one really had the freedom to travel to other worlds. And really, there is nothing more liberating than walking up to the galaxy map and choosing to travel to another world.